So welcome to Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. It's a weekly show that goes out over YouTube and as a podcast over all of the major channels. And each week I get to sit with an inspiring person and listen to them tell their story and share it with all of you. This week is no different. I'm really lucky to be joined by Cynthia Wandia. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thanks, Craig. Great to
and
be
you
here.
might notice a brand new format. We're using StreamYard for this recording. I hope it works. It's the first time I've used it without adult supervision, so we'll play with it. But I'll give Cynthia a quick introduction. Cynthia is the CEO and co-founder of Kwara, which is a digital banking experience for savings and credit cooperatives. We'll talk about how these structures work. But basically, sub-Saharan Africa and a lot of Africa and Southeast Asia is unbanked or underbanked, and these financial cooperatives are the sort of substitute for the formal banking system. And Kwara provides a beautiful sort of digital experience both for the cooperative and for the members. Cynthia's got a very impressive set of credentials. She's a graduate of Yale University, graduated with a Bachelor of Science, also did a business bridge program at Tuck Business School, has had a lot of experience with some big name companies like Johnson & Johnson, IKEA, Lehman Brothers. Those were mostly finance roles. Then with E.ON, the energy company, is now a serial entrepreneur, has been a founder before. Astra Innovations was the name of that company, was a venture developer at FinParks, and does a bunch of stuff outside work as well, which we'll talk about because I think it's absolutely fascinating. Cynthia, you and I met in Lagos, right?
We did. We did.
And maybe let's talk a little bit about how we met and why you were there.
So I was attending the Google Immersion program, which was looking to connect African startups with investors, primarily from Europe. Just got to tell our story, speak about the problem we're solving. And I was extremely pleased to see your interest alongside a number of other investors just to learn more about our business and eventually becoming one of our angel investors.
I did. I was so impressed. I put my own money into Kwara, and I remember one of the things that I was super impressed by, other than the business, is your language capability. You speak 7 languages. You're able to learn a language really quickly, as I understand it. I think you're in Germany right now, right?
Yes, I am in Germany, and I can safely say context is really helpful. So right now I'm hearing German everywhere. It's very easy to say, Guten Tag, ich wünsche dir alle einen schönen Tag. So wishing you a lovely day as you watch us. But I've always loved languages, and they act as a key to unlock your experience in the world and to connect with people. So it's 7 languages, not counting, let's call them the local languages, like my grandmother's language and so on.
Oh, wow. And you're based in Nairobi mostly, aren't you, in Kenya?
Yes, yeah. Yes. So the company, we founded it in Germany together with a German investor, but the primary target market was always emerging markets, starting in Kenya, which I was familiar with because I'm from there, but with ambitions to grow globally.
And you split your time between Nairobi and I think Berlin, isn't it? You're in Berlin.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Wonderful place. Well, super impressive. I speak one other language other than English poorly, and so it always I find it completely impressive that people like you can learn languages so quickly. You've also got a lot of outside interests. You're an international election observer for the country of Venezuela and also for Cambodia. What got you into that?
So it came out of being a member of the Yale International Relations Association, and that just brings together people interested in how the world works and why it works the way it does. Coming from a country that has had various experiments with democracy, shall I say, I've always been keen to just understand citizen engagement in elections. And when the opportunity came to first go to, I believe it was Cambodia first and then Venezuela. I jumped at it, and it's very interesting to see how countries treat this process. And we were quite privileged to be able to observe and share our thoughts on it. And I hope to continue engaging in that part of the political sphere as long as I can.
Not supervising the US presidential elections then?
Ooh, I think that one's a little more controversial.
Indeed it is. Let's change gears and talk about business. You're a serial entrepreneur, a very impressive founder and co-founder and CEO. What drew you into business in the first place? Because you were a finance professional for many years, weren't you?
Mm-hmm. I think once my exposure into finance showed me, and it was a small window into the world of business, so to speak. So it's a small part of business, but you start to see how the different parts of a business come together to generate, for example, a bottom line. And I was always impressed by the ability of business to solve a problem successfully and, let's say, die a natural death if it was not doing so. And I think that check and balance is what made me think that combining business with a meaningful or a social problem would yield a higher success rate if we found the right solution, and would yield a much needed death rate, let's say, if we were wrong.
Well, I'm hoping very much, as one of your angel investors, we don't get a premature death on Kwara, and I'm pretty positive we won't. Tell us a bit about, first of all, the market context, and for those who may be unfamiliar, what is a savings and credit cooperative, a SACCO?
Mm-hmm. So a savings and credit cooperative is this incredible idea, starting off usually from a group of people who know each other, who start to pool their savings together in a shared pot. And that pot becomes available when one of the members requires any additional capital than they'd be able to raise at a go. And it can start off as small as 10 members. And this concept that has been around for hundreds of years can bring people together who have a shared bond and grow to the extent that in Kenya, for example, you see savings and credit cooperatives for certain groups like teachers growing to over 1 million members. And at that point, with that level of capital, they can compete with, let's say, or rival some of the financial institutions. Now, because of the community mindset, they get started wherever people need them. So their reach is usually much wider than commercial banks. And the members are the shareholders. So the cooperative always acts in their interests and is in its essence a nonprofit. At the end of the year, all profit is returned to the members. And we just think it's one of the most sustainable ways to provide financial opportunities across markets, developed economies. But in emerging markets, we find them not having been able to capture the value of technology. And so we just committed to doing what we can to help them turn into digital banks.
What is it about Africa and parts of Southeast Asia and other parts that have cooperatives? You know, I grew up in New Zealand, I live in the UK. The idea of a financial cooperative really isn't familiar. You know, I'm used to having a bank. Mm-hmm. Why did they come about?
I'd actually say that this concept came about even across all markets. It's just that they're less recognizable or differentiated in developed economies. So in the UK, you might know of a community bank. In the US and Canada, they're known as credit unions. From the outside, they might look very much like commercial banks. They've got a lot of infrastructure, ATMs, they give you a card, you've got internet, mobile banking. So from afar, you might not recognize certain aspects of it. That differential is just much greater in emerging markets. So there, the commercial banks typically serve corporate customers and high net worth individuals and are able to invest in infrastructure much faster. And the cooperatives are left a bit behind to be much more local and much more undigitized. But if you look in Germany, in the Netherlands, as I said, in the US, there are these credit unions, these group institutions. And if you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find they typically have incredible customer service, member attention, fantastic rates, and overall still provide a more profitable experience for the members than your average commercial bank.
So hiding in plain sight, perhaps everywhere. And give us a feel of the scale. Let's start with Kenya. What sort of capital is circulating in cooperatives like this?
Yes, so for institutions that sort of lay low, as we say, they have an incredibly impressive share of market. So it's said that up to a third of the country's savings are held in savings cooperatives, and almost a half of the GDP of Kenya passes through cooperatives. Kenya is the largest market for cooperatives, with about over 5,000 registered cooperatives in Africa. But when we look at the global scale, Africa holds about 10% of the assets in cooperatives that we see in Southeast Asia and also in Latin America. So plenty of room to grow. And what we just want to make sure is we close this differential gap in technology so that cooperatives can continue to attract the more millennial, mobile-first individuals that make up the 77% of Africans who are under 35.
Right. And I think I remember, if I remember your pitch, it was something like 9 billion of capital in circulation in Kenya alone. And
yes, USD, and that's quite significant.
Yeah, and even more in regions like Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a huge market, and interesting that they're sort of hiding in plain sight in developed economies, more common than we perhaps think, or certainly that I think. But what a massive opportunity, and why is it that, I guess, formal banks or traditional banks, I should say, aren't as common or prevalent in places like sub-Saharan Africa? What is it about the countries and the economy in that area?
Mm-hmm. So initially, it has a lot to do with the cost to serve. If you had to, as a bank, pull the infrastructure, let's say, to remote areas, these are still countries where the city is the magnet for employment and for jobs and so on. So people move to the city. There's not that much of a distributed economy across the countries. So setting up multiple branches across the countries could be very expensive. And even when it's done, it just means there's a higher cost to serving the customer. But on top of that, when you look at the regulations, banks have to meet extremely high prudential guidelines. And that means even when it comes to supplying credit facilities, the checks and balances required at a bank level are just much higher. And then you take a person who has no assets, possibly not even easily accessible registration documents, and they need financial services as well. Legally, the commercial bank might not be able actually to serve them, right? If you can't produce a national ID or birth certificate and so on. And even though these are all, rights, citizen rights, not everybody has access to these kind of documentation and therefore cannot access services from commercial banks. So it comes back to, also this communal mindset, at least I can speak to in Africa and Kenya, where the people around you and they're willing to vouch for you and get you going. So the requirements at the cooperative level are less, they're less strict. And because you can get started with no asset or no collateral and start to use your savings as collateral over time, it becomes a very inclusive way to get financial services, because you can start with nothing and over time really build up an asset base, a network of people who would guarantee you if you need additional capital, and over time you can participate in investments made by the cooperative for which you get a share of the returns.
Okay, and I think you can also borrow money, is that right?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the main features, you'd say, because they're savings and credit. And so they work on the basis of savings-backed loans. So first you have to save, which already supports more financial stability, even if it takes time. They encourage savings as low as $5 a month even, just to get you started. And then at some point when you are ready to borrow, you can either borrow the amount equivalent to your savings, or if you need a bit more than that, you can borrow up to 3 times your savings if you get other people within the cooperative to guarantee you. So all of a sudden, your social capital becomes, a legitimate asset that you can use to leverage, and that makes all the difference when trying to raise a bit more capital, let's say for a business, or even in an emergency, or even to make a longer term investment like build a home.
Right. And what would be the average size of a loan for those people who do borrow? And obviously there'll be a huge range, but give us a sense of the scale of borrowings if you're a farmer or a nurse or a teacher.
Mm-hmm. So you'll have different types of products. There'll be an emergency sort of 30-day loan, no interest, and that's just to get you out of any trouble. That could be anywhere from the range of 50 to 200 pounds, maybe a little bit higher at the most. And then normal loans with a tenure of, let's say, a year could be in the range of 5 to 10,000 pounds at the higher range. And this is really able to support a small business person to get started on some assets and maybe inventory and so on. And then some of the cooperatives will offer slightly longer tenures, like a 4-year loan, if there's really like a housing project being undertaken. But most of the loans are less than 5,000 pounds at the higher end, and 50 to 100 pounds at the lower end.
Right. So really, for the most part, what we would typically recognize, certainly in developed economies, is microfinance, and the service you offer perhaps is best explained by starting with what a financial cooperative might look like pre-digitization. What when you walk into one of these, explain the setup. How do they work? Mm-hmm. Pre-digitization.
Right. So they can be, say it's a employer-based cooperative, or it's just a special interest group cooperative, having started out from a group of people who know each other. They might be keeping physical files per member with some copies of their identification and just sort of a running record of any savings that have been issued, a receipt, slip, a deposit slip, all filed. And of course, that becomes very vulnerable to a number of things, destruction, fire, loss, and so on. At some point, they can move on to investing in, the one laptop, some Excel, being able to keep a couple of spreadsheets going. But once again, like the interaction with the member means it's very high touch. Either they have to congregate once a month and do their books, or there's a lot of calling and back and forth. When they grow a little bit bigger, they might be able to bring on, let's say, an individual developer, help build some custom software that just sort of helps reconcile things. But there's always a disconnect between where the financial management is happening and where the member is. And where the member is where the financial services are needed. So beyond that, that disconnect is what leads to the cooperative not being able to meet the members' needs when they arise, and then the members being forced, in some cases, to go for less friendly or more predatory experiences that just provide an instant financing. So this is where we see the real issue, and where we saw an opportunity to just empower the cooperative to meet its members' needs instantly.
Right. Effectively, what you're talking about is loan sharking, payday loans, and extremely high interest rates. And a cooperative in that sense is not only inclusive, but also reasonable. I'm going to try and add a screen share into this, sort of all sorts of experiments going on today. So this gives you a feel for the contrast, right? So there's a nice little screenshot there of what the member would see. Mm-hmm. when they adopt Kwara. And it looks to me, I'm a Revolut customer actually, and it looks to me very much like the Revolut interface, very modern. And I guess you can do all of your transactions in this way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's what we wanted to deliver. We built Kwara to be able to turn a cooperative into a digital bank, because that is the experience that individuals are looking for. It's what they expect. Even the unbanked, they're interacting with modern experiences. They use WhatsApp. They might have a Gmail account. They certainly use social media, and therefore, when they move from that experience to a completely offline or broken financial experience, it becomes easy for the historical loan sharks or payday loans that have always existed, but that have now been able to also harness technology and deliver a loan in 5 minutes, to capture their attention and their need. And that's what we do. We basically build this experience that's world class and give it to cooperatives so they can continue their ethos, but in the 21st century.
Well, it's an amazing business, and it certainly opened my eyes to the possibilities and the I guess the potential to do social good while you're doing business at the same time. I'll leave you with the last word. There may be people watching this who are coming out of college or school, thinking about their next, their next step, or people who are perhaps at some sort of intersection in their lives. What advice would you have for them? You with me, Cynthia?
Yes, I am.
Did you hear my question?
I missed the question. There was a bit of a...
So my question is, if you're a viewer, you're perhaps coming out of school or university, maybe changing careers, what advice would you have for them with all of your experience? What advice?
Well, I would say the being open to try things is my mantra. So what you don't know but seems exciting, give it a chance. There's a lot that can be learned by doing, I think, even much more than maybe even by hearing about things. So if something piques your interest, give it a shot. I do think we are in an era of having multiple careers and multiple interests, and all of them sort of feeding each other in a way that you might not even understand while it's happening, but it starts to make sense over time. Currently, by some of the experiences that I had long. I think I'm losing you a bit, Craig, but let me know if you heard that.
Yeah, it's breaking up a little. I think the essence of what you're saying is give it a go. Don't be afraid to try the unknown. And you're certainly, a walking example of that. Cynthia Wandia, thank you for joining me this morning. You're an inspiration.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for having me, and speak to you very soon.
Thank you.